Imagine this. You are standing in your backyard on a clear night looking up at the stars. The moon shines bright and silver above your head. You see the sun setting in the west, painting the sky orange and red. Every day the sun rises and sets. Every night the moon changes shape from new to full and back again. The stars twinkle in patterns that never change. Have you ever wondered how all these lights in the sky know exactly where to go? Have you ever asked yourself who tells the sun which path to take, or who shows the moon its way across the heavens? Long ago there lived a man named Enoch who asked these very same questions. But Enoch did not just wonder about these things. He was chosen by God to learn the greatest secrets of heaven and earth. Enoch was not like other men. He walked with God in a special way that no one else had ever done before. While other people lived their lives and died when their time came, Enoch never died at all. Instead, God took him up to heaven while he was still alive, so he could learn the mysteries that no human eyes had ever seen. The story of Enoch is written in ancient books that tell us amazing things about the world above our heads. These books tell us that heaven has 12 special gates, like doorways in a great wall. Through these gates, the sun and moon travel every single day and night. Each gate has its own purpose and its own time. The sun uses some gates during spring and summer, and different gates during fall and winter. The moon has its own special route through these same gates, following a path that God designed just for it. But these are not ordinary gates like the ones you might see around your house or school. These are gates made of light and glory that stretch across the heavens. They are so beautiful and bright that no human could look at them without being changed forever. They are watched over by powerful angels who make sure everything happens exactly when it should. These angels know the names of every star and the path of every planet. They count the days and seasons and make sure that spring always follows winter and that summer always comes after spring. Enoch learned about all of these things during his journey to heaven. He saw the gates with his own eyes. He met the angels who guard them. He learned the secrets of how the sun knows to rise in the east and set in the west. He discovered why the moon changes shape and why some stars are brighter than others. Most amazing of all, he learned that everything in the sky follows a perfect plan that God made before the world began. Who was Enoch? Before we learn about the 12 gates of heaven, we need to understand who Enoch was and why God chose him for this incredible journey. Enoch lived a very long time ago when the world was still young. He was the great-great-great-great-grandson of Adam, the first man that God created. Enoch had a father named Jared, and Enoch had a son named Methuselah, who became famous for living longer than any other person in history. But Enoch was special in a different way. While most people in those days lived for hundreds of years, Enoch only lived on earth for 365 years. That might sound like a long time to us, but it was actually much shorter than most people lived back then. The reason Enoch did not live as long on earth is because God had a different plan for him. Instead of growing old and dying like everyone else, God took Enoch up to heaven to live there forever. The Bible tells us that Enoch walked with God. This does not just mean that Enoch was a good person who tried to do right things. It means that Enoch had a friendship with God that was closer than anyone else had ever experienced. Every day Enoch would talk with God like you might talk with your best friend. God would teach Enoch about the secrets of creation and show him things that were hidden from other people. Enoch was also a prophet, which means God gave him special messages to share with other people. But the most important thing about Enoch was that he pleased God with his whole heart. He did not just follow God when it was easy or when other people were watching. Enoch chose to follow God even when it was hard, even when other people did not understand, and even when he had to do things differently than everyone around him. Because Enoch was so faithful, and because God loved him so much, God decided to show Enoch the greatest secrets of heaven and earth. One day, while Enoch was walking with God, as he did every day, something amazing happened. Instead of saying goodbye at the end of their time together, God kept walking with Enoch right up into the sky. Higher and higher they went until they passed through the clouds and beyond the blue sky into the realm of heaven itself. This was the beginning of Enoch's incredible journey through the heavens. It was during this journey that Enoch learned about the 12 gates and the secret routes that the sun and moon follow every day. God wanted Enoch to see these things so that people on earth would know that everything in the sky happens according to God's perfect plan. Nothing happens by accident. Every sunrise and sunset, every full moon and new moon, every change of season happens exactly when and how God intended it to happen. The journey to heaven begins. When Enoch first began to rise up from the earth toward heaven, he felt scared and amazed at the same time. He had never been so high above the ground before. As he looked down, he could see his house getting smaller and smaller until it looked like a tiny dot. The trees and rivers and mountains that had seemed so big and important from the ground now looked like a beautiful painting spread out below him. But as wonderful as the view of Earth was from above, Enoch soon discovered that the real wonders were still ahead of him. As he traveled higher, he began to see things that no person had ever seen before. He saw layers of heaven stretching out above him, like floors in a great building. Each layer was more beautiful and more glorious than the one below it. The light grew brighter and brighter until it seemed like the air itself was made of pure gold and silver. The first angels that Enoch met were tall and shining beings who looked like men but were far more beautiful and powerful than any human. Their faces glowed with a light that came from within them. Their clothes were whiter than the whitest snow and seemed to be made of light itself. When they spoke, their voices sounded like music that made Enoch feel peaceful and happy deep in his heart. These angels greeted Enoch with joy and respect. They told him that God had sent them to be his guides during his journey through heaven. They explained that he would see many wonderful and mysterious things, but that he should not be afraid, because God was with him every step of the way. The angels also told Enoch that everything he would learn was meant to be shared with people on earth, so they would know how great and wise God is. As they traveled together through the heavens, the angels began to teach Enoch about the way God had organized everything in creation. They showed him that heaven was not just one big empty space, but was divided into many different areas, each with its own purpose. Some areas were where angels lived and worshipped God. Other areas were where the souls of good people went when they died. But the areas that would amaze Enoch most were the places where God controlled all the lights in the sky. The angels explained to Enoch that everything people could see in the sky, the sun and moon and stars and planets, all had their homes in heaven. During the day, the sun would shine down on earth from its place in heaven. At night, it would return to heaven to rest until it was time to shine again the next day. The moon and stars did the same thing, following paths through heaven that God had made for them before the world began. But the most amazing thing the angels told Enoch was about the 12 gates. These gates, they explained, were like doorways between heaven and earth. The sun and moon and stars did not just wander randomly across the sky. Instead, they followed exact routes that took them through specific gates at specific times. Each gate was designed for certain times of the year and certain purposes. Together, the 12 gates made sure that Earth had exactly the right amount of light and warmth during every season. The first glimpse of the gates. When Enoch first saw the 12 gates of heaven, he could hardly believe what his eyes were showing him. Stretched across the eastern horizon of heaven was a magnificent wall that seemed to go on forever in both directions. In this wall were 12 openings, each one glowing with its own special kind of light. Some gates glowed with the warm golden light of summer sunshine. Others shimmered with the cooler silver light of winter mornings. Each gate was beautiful in its own way, but together they created a sight more wonderful than anything Enoch could have imagined. The gates were not like doors that you might see on Earth made of wood or metal. Instead, they seemed to be made of pure light and energy. They pulsed and glowed with a rhythm like a giant heartbeat. Sometimes a gate would grow brighter, and Enoch could see streams of light flowing through it down toward the earth below. Other times a gate would grow dimmer, as if it was resting and gathering strength for its next time to shine. Each gate was enormous, much larger than any building Enoch had ever seen on Earth. They were so tall that Enoch could not see their tops, and so wide that it would take a long time to walk from one side to the other. Around each gate were beautiful decorations that looked like they were made of precious stones and metals. But these were not ordinary jewels. They were heavenly materials that glowed with their own inner light and changed colors like rainbows. Standing guard at each gate were powerful angels who were even more glorious than the angels who had guided Enoch to this place. These guardian angels were responsible for making sure that the sun and moon and stars used the correct gates at the correct times. They carried books that contained all the information about when each gate should be opened and closed. They also had instruments that helped them measure time and distance with perfect accuracy. The angel who was guiding Enoch pointed to the gates and began to explain how they worked. He told Enoch that there were 6 gates on the eastern side of heaven where the sun and moon would rise, and 6 gates on the western side where they would set. The gates were arranged in a specific order, and each one was used during certain parts of the year. During the spring and summer months, the sun would use gates that were positioned higher in the sky. During fall and winter, it would use gates that were lower down. This is why Enoch learned the sun appears to move higher and lower in the sky as the seasons change. It is not that the sun itself moves up and down. Instead, the sun uses different gates during different times of the year. When it uses the higher gates in spring and summer, it appears higher in the sky, and its light is stronger and warmer. When it uses the lower gates in fall and winter, it appears lower in the sky, and its light is gentler and cooler. The angel also explained that the moon follows its own special pattern through the gates. Unlike the sun, which uses the same gates for several months at a time, the moon changes its path much more often. Sometimes the moon follows the same route as the sun, but at other times it takes a completely different path. This is why the moon sometimes appears high in the sky and sometimes appears low. It is also why the moon sometimes rises during the day and sometimes rises at night. The angels who guard the gates. As Enoch drew closer to the 12 gates, he began to meet the angels who had been given the responsibility of watching over them. These were not ordinary angels, but were among the most powerful and important beings in all of heaven. Each angel had been specially chosen by God for this work because of their wisdom and faithfulness. They had been doing this job since the very beginning of creation, and they would continue doing it until the end of time. The first angel that Enoch met was named Uriel. Uriel was in charge of watching over the movements of the sun through all 12 gates. He was tall and bright, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like gentle thunder. Uriel carried a great book that contained all the laws about how the sun should move through the gates during every day of the year. This book had pages made of light, and the words written on it glowed like stars. Uriel showed Enoch how he used this book to make sure the sun always rose and set at exactly the right time. He explained that the sun was not free to go wherever it wanted to go. Instead, it had to follow very specific rules that God had made. These rules told the sun which gate to use each morning, which path to follow across the sky during the day, and which gate to use each evening when it was time to set. The angel Uriel also told Enoch about the helpers who worked with him to guide the sun. There were hundreds of other angels whose job was to accompany the sun on its daily journey across the sky. Some angels would go ahead of the sun to prepare its path. Others would follow behind to make sure everything stayed in order. Still others would surround the sun like guards to protect it and keep it moving at exactly the right speed. Next, Enoch met the angel who was responsible for the moon. This angel's name was Gabriel, and he was just as glorious and powerful as Uriel. But where Uriel's light was golden like the sun, Gabriel's light was silver like the moon. Gabriel carried his own special book that contained all the laws about how the moon should move through the 12 gates. His book was even more complicated than Uriel's because the moon's path changes much more often than the sun's path. Gabriel explained to Enoch that the moon had a much more difficult job than the sun. While the sun follows the same basic pattern every year, the moon has to change its pattern every month. Sometimes the moon needs to appear as a thin crescent just after sunset. Other times it needs to appear as a full circle high in the middle of the night sky. Sometimes it needs to rise before the sun, and sometimes it needs to rise after the sun has set. To do all of these different things, the moon has to use different combinations of gates during each month. Gabriel and his helper angels have to calculate exactly which gates to use and when to use them, so that people on Earth will see the moon going through its proper phases. This requires great skill and wisdom, because even the smallest mistake could cause confusion in the timing of months and seasons. Enoch also met angels who were responsible for the stars. These angels had names like Raguel and Sariel and Michael. Each of them watched over different groups of stars and made sure they stayed in their proper places in the sky. Unlike the sun and moon, which travel through the 12 gates every day and month, the stars move much more slowly. But they do move, and the angels have to guide them carefully so that the star patterns people see gradually change over long periods of time. All of these angels work together like members of a great orchestra. Each one had their own part to play, but they all followed the same conductor, who was God himself. They communicated with each other, constantly sharing information about timing and positions, and making sure that everything in the sky worked together in perfect harmony. How the sun travels through the gates. Now that Enoch had met the angels who controlled the movements of the sun and moon, he was ready to learn the details of how the 12 gates actually worked. The angel Uriel took Enoch to a place where they could watch the sun beginning its daily journey. It was early morning in heaven, though time worked differently there than it did on earth. Enoch could see the sun waiting at one of the eastern gates, getting ready to rise and bring light to the world below. The sun itself was far more beautiful than it appeared when seen from earth. Instead of being too bright to look at directly, the sun in heaven glowed with a warm, friendly light that filled Enoch with happiness and energy. It was surrounded by angels who sang praises to God as they prepared for another day of bringing light and warmth to creation. The sun seemed to be alive and joyful, eager to begin its work of lighting up the world. Uriel explained to Enoch that the sun does not use the same gate every day of the year. Instead, it follows a pattern that takes exactly 1 year to complete. During the spring months, the sun uses gates that are positioned toward the north side of the eastern wall. As spring turns to summer, the sun gradually moves to gates that are even further north. At the very middle of summer, the sun uses the northernmost gate, which causes it to rise earliest and set latest, making the longest day of the year. After the middle of summer, the sun begins to move back toward the south. Day by day, it uses gates that are a little bit further south than the day before. This makes the days gradually grow shorter and the nights grow longer. By the time autumn arrives, the sun is using gates in the middle of the eastern wall. At the middle of autumn, the sun uses a gate that is exactly in the center, causing day and night to be equal in length. As autumn turns to winter, the sun continues moving toward the south gates. The days grow shorter and shorter until the middle of winter, when the sun uses the southernmost gate. This creates the shortest day and longest night of the year. After that, the sun begins its journey back toward the north, and the cycle starts over again. This pattern repeats every single year without fail, because the angels follow God's instructions perfectly. But the sun's journey through the gates is not just about rising in the east. Uriel showed Enoch that there are also 6 gates on the western side of heaven, where the sun sets each evening. These western gates are arranged in exactly the same pattern as the eastern gates. When the sun uses a northern gate to rise in the morning, it also uses the corresponding northern gate to set in the evening. When it uses a southern gate to rise, it uses the matching southern gate to set. During its journey from the eastern gate to the western gate, the sun follows a path across the heavenly sky that determines how high it appears from Earth. When the sun uses the northern gates, its path arcs high overhead, bringing strong light and heat to the earth below. When it uses the southern gates, its path stays lower in the sky, bringing gentler light and less heat. This is what creates the difference between summer and winter. Enoch watched in amazement as the sun completed its daily journey. He could see how perfectly everything was timed and coordinated. The sun never hesitated or slowed down or sped up. It moved at exactly the right pace to reach the western gate at precisely the right moment. And as soon as the sun passed through the western gate and disappeared from the view of people on earth, it began its journey back through heaven to the eastern gate, where it would rise again the next morning. The moon's secret path. While the sun's journey through the 12 gates follows a pattern that takes a full year to complete, the moon's journey is much more complex and fascinating. The angel Gabriel took Enoch to observe the moon as it prepared for its own travels through the gates. Unlike the sun, which shines with its own light, the moon glowed with a softer reflected light that changed brightness depending on its position relative to the sun. Gabriel explained to Enoch that the moon has a completely different job than the sun. While the sun's purpose is to provide light and heat for the day, the moon's purpose is to provide light for the night and to help people keep track of months and seasons. To do this job properly, the moon must constantly change its appearance and its timing. Sometimes people on Earth see the moon as a thin crescent, sometimes as a half circle, and sometimes as a complete full circle. These changes in the moon's appearance happen because of which gate the moon uses, and when it uses that gate compared to the sun. When the moon uses a gate that is close to the sun's gate and travels through heaven near the sun, people on Earth see very little of the moon, or no moon at all. This is called the new moon. When the moon uses a gate that is far from the sun's gate and travels on the opposite side of heaven from the sun, people see the moon as completely round and bright. This is called the full moon. Gabriel showed Enoch how the moon moves through a complete cycle of gates every month. At the beginning of each month, the moon starts by using the same gate as the sun, or a gate very close to it. Day by day, the moon moves to gates that are further and further from the sun's gate. About 2 weeks into the month, the moon is using a gate on the completely opposite side of heaven from the sun. Then the moon begins moving back toward the sun's gate until at the end of the month, it is close to the sun again, and the cycle starts over. This monthly pattern of the moon creates what people on Earth call the phases of the moon. During the first week of the month, when the moon is moving away from the sun's gate, people see a crescent moon that grows a little bigger each night. During the second week, the moon appears as a half circle that continues growing. In the third week, the moon appears full and round and bright. During the fourth week, the moon appears to shrink back to a half circle and then to a crescent until it disappears entirely and the cycle begins again. But Gabriel revealed to Enoch that the moon's journey is even more complicated than this basic monthly pattern. The moon does not always use exactly the same gates during each month. Sometimes the moon travels through gates that are higher in the sky, and sometimes through gates that are lower. Sometimes it moves quickly through the gates, and sometimes more slowly. These variations create small differences in exactly when the moon rises and sets, and how high it appears in the sky. The reason for these variations is that the moon must work together with the sun to create the proper timing for seasons and years. While the sun takes exactly 365¼ days to complete its journey through all 12 gates, the moon takes only about 29½ days to complete its monthly cycle. This means that 12 moon cycles do not equal exactly one sun cycle. The angels who control the moon must make small adjustments to keep the moon's timing coordinated with the sun's timing. Enoch watched as Gabriel consulted his book of lunar laws to determine exactly which gate the moon should use on this particular night. The calculations were incredibly complex, involving not just the current day and month, but also the year, and even longer cycles that took many years to complete. Gabriel had to consider the position of the sun, the time of year, the phase the moon needed to show, and many other factors before deciding on the perfect gate for the moon to use. As the moon began its journey through the chosen gate, Enoch could see how its light would appear to people on Earth. From his position in heaven, he could look down and see exactly how much of the moon would be visible and how bright it would appear. He understood now why the moon sometimes seemed to smile like a crescent, and sometimes glowed like a silver coin, and sometimes disappeared entirely from the night sky. The secrets of the stars. After learning about the paths of the sun and moon through the 12 gates, Enoch was eager to understand how the stars fit into this grand design. The angel Raguel, who was responsible for many of the star groups, took Enoch to a place in heaven where they could observe the stars preparing for their nightly appearance over the earth. What Enoch saw amazed him even more than what he had learned about the sun and moon. Unlike the sun and moon, which were single great lights, the stars were countless in number. From Earth, people could see thousands of stars, but from heaven, Enoch could see that there were actually millions and millions of them stretching out into the depths of space farther than his eyes could follow. Each star was a sun like the one that lit up the Earth, but most of them were much farther away. Some were larger and brighter than Earth's sun, while others were smaller and dimmer. Raguel explained to Enoch that the stars also traveled through the 12 gates, but in a very different way than the sun and moon. While the sun and moon moved through the gates every day and month, the stars moved much more slowly. Groups of stars would use the same gates for months or even years at a time. But gradually, over long periods, the stars would shift from one gate to another, creating slow changes in which stars people could see during different seasons. The stars were organized into groups that people on Earth called constellations. Each constellation was like a family of stars that traveled together and helped each other stay in the proper formation. Some constellations looked like animals or people or objects when seen from Earth. Others formed geometric patterns or flowing shapes, but from heaven, Enoch could see that each constellation had its own purpose in God's plan for creation. Some constellations were responsible for marking the seasons. When certain star groups appeared in the eastern gates, people on Earth knew that spring was coming. When other constellations took their turn in the gates, it was a sign that summer or fall or winter was approaching. Farmers and shepherds and sailors had learned to read these star signs to know when to plant crops, or move their flocks, or navigate their ships. Other constellations helped mark longer periods of time. Some star patterns appeared in the same position only once every few years. Others followed cycles that took decades or even centuries to complete. These longer star cycles helped wise men and scholars keep track of history and predict important events. They also helped priests and religious leaders know when to celebrate special festivals and holy days. Raguel showed Enoch the books that contained the laws governing each constellation. These books were even more detailed than the books that controlled the sun and moon, because there were so many more stars to keep track of. Every single star had its own name and its own assigned position and its own role to play in the great cosmic dance. The angels had to make sure that not even one star wandered from its appointed path or shone brighter or dimmer than it was supposed to. Some of the brightest stars had special responsibilities. These stars served as leaders for their constellations, helping to guide the other stars along their proper paths. They also served as reference points that the angels could use to check the positions of the sun and moon. If the sun or moon ever started to drift from their assigned routes, the angels could use the positions of these bright guide stars to make corrections and get everything back on track. Enoch learned that the stars also worked together to influence conditions on Earth in ways that most people never realized. Different combinations of stars rising through the eastern gates would bring different types of weather. Some star patterns encouraged rain and gentle breezes, while others brought clear skies and calm conditions. The angels coordinated these star influences with the positions of the sun and moon to create the climate and weather patterns that each region of Earth needed. As Enoch watched the stars beginning their nightly journey through the gates, he felt overwhelmed by the incredible complexity and beauty of God's creation. Every single point of light in the night sky was following a precise plan that had been designed before the world began. Nothing was left to chance or accident. Every star knew its place and its purpose and worked together with all the other stars to create a masterpiece of order and harmony that declared the glory of God to anyone who took time to really look and understand. The 4 seasons and the gates. One of the most important things that Enoch learned during his heavenly journey was how the 12 gates create the 4 seasons that people experience on Earth. The angel Uriel took special care to explain this to Enoch, because understanding the seasons was crucial for people on Earth to know when to plant and harvest their crops, when to prepare for cold weather, and when to celebrate the renewal of life that comes each spring. Uriel showed Enoch that the 12 gates were arranged in 4 groups of 3 gates each. The first group contained the 3 gates that the sun used during spring. These gates were positioned in the eastern wall at a medium height, neither the highest nor the lowest positions. When the sun rose through these spring gates, it brought gentle warmth that awakened plants from their winter sleep and encouraged new growth throughout the natural world. The second group contained the 3 gates used during summer. These were the highest gates in the eastern wall positioned so that when the sun passed through them, it would arc high overhead during its journey to the western gates. The high path of the summer sun brought strong heat and bright light that helped plants grow tall and strong and brought their fruits to ripeness. The summer gates also caused the days to be longer than the nights, giving extra hours of sunlight for growth. The third group contained the 3 gates used during autumn. These gates were positioned at the same medium height as the spring gates, but they were used when the sun was traveling from the high summer position back toward the low winter position. The autumn gates brought cooler temperatures and shorter days that signaled to plants that it was time to prepare for winter. Trees would change their leaf colors and drop their leaves, while animals would grow thicker coats and gather food for the cold months ahead. The fourth group contained the 3 gates used during winter. These were the lowest gates in the eastern wall, positioned so that the sun would follow a low path across the sky. The winter gates brought gentle light and mild warmth that allowed the earth to rest and recover from the busy growing season. The short days and long nights of winter gave plants and animals time to sleep and conserve their energy for the new growth that would begin again in spring. But Enoch learned that the transition from one group of gates to another did not happen suddenly. Instead, the sun moved gradually from gate to gate within each group and then slowly transitioned to the first gate of the next group. This created gradual changes in temperature and daylight that allowed plants and animals to adapt smoothly to each new season. If the sun suddenly jumped from a summer gate to a winter gate, the shock would damage or kill much of the life on Earth. Each group of 3 gates also had its own special characteristics that created variety within each season. The first gate of spring brought the earliest gentle warmth that melted snow and ice. The second spring gate brought stronger warmth that started new plant growth. The third spring gate brought the full energy of spring that caused flowers to bloom and trees to grow new leaves. Summer, fall, and winter each had similar variations within their 3 gates. Uriel explained to Enoch that different parts of the earth experienced the seasons at different times because of the way the earth was shaped and positioned relative to the gates. When the sun was using the northern summer gates to bring hot weather to lands in the north, it was simultaneously bringing winter weather to lands in the south. 6 months later, when the sun moved to the southern gates, the seasons would reverse. This meant that somewhere on Earth it was always spring, somewhere it was always summer, somewhere it was always fall, and somewhere it was always winter. The angel also revealed that the exact timing of the seasons could vary slightly from year to year because of small adjustments that the angels had to make to keep everything in perfect balance. Sometimes spring might arrive a few days earlier or later than expected. Sometimes winter might be a little longer or shorter than usual. These small variations were not mistakes, but were part of God's plan to keep the earth healthy and to prevent people from taking the regularity of the seasons for granted. Enoch was amazed to learn that the angels had to coordinate the seasonal changes not just for plants and weather, but also for all the animals on Earth. Different animals needed different signals to know when to migrate, when to hibernate, when to mate, and when to raise their young. The angels used specific combinations of gates and timing to send exactly the right signals to each type of animal so that everything would happen at the proper time for the health and survival of each species. The 12 gates revealed. Having learned the general principles of how the gates worked, Enoch was now ready to understand the specific details of each of the 12 gates. The angel Uriel took him on a tour of all 12 gates, starting with the first gate of spring and ending with the last gate of winter. Each gate had its own personality and purpose, and Enoch found that he could recognize each one by its unique appearance and the special quality of light that flowed through it. The first gate of spring was located at the southeastern part of the eastern wall. When Enoch approached this gate, he felt a sense of hope and new beginning. The light that flowed through this gate was soft and golden, like the light of early morning. It carried with it the promise that winter was ending and that new life was about to emerge all over the earth. The angels who guarded this gate sang songs about renewal and fresh starts, and the joy of awakening from a long sleep. The second gate of spring was positioned higher and more toward the center of the eastern wall. Its light was brighter and warmer than the first gate, carrying the energy needed to push plants up through the soil and to encourage animals to become active after the quiet months of winter. When the sun passed through this gate, people on Earth would notice that the days were becoming noticeably longer and warmer, and that flowers were beginning to bloom in gardens and fields. The third gate of spring was higher still and marked the transition towards summer. The light from this gate was strong and energetic, filled with the power of growth and expansion. Trees would burst into full leaf when the sun used this gate, and young animals would be born throughout the natural world. This gate represented the full flowering of spring, when everything on Earth was green and growing and full of life. The first gate of summer was the beginning of the three highest gates in the eastern wall. When Enoch looked through this gate, he could feel the intensity of its light and heat. This was the gate that brought the strong energy needed to ripen fruits and vegetables, and to give plants the power they needed to produce seeds for the next generation. The sun's passage through this gate created the long, warm days that people associated with the beginning of summer. The second gate of summer was the highest and most powerful of all 12 gates. This was the gate that created the longest day of the year, when the sun rose earliest and set latest. The light that blazed through this gate was so intense that it could power the growth of giant trees and bring deserts to bloom with hidden life. Yet it was also perfectly controlled, so that it would warm the earth without burning it and energize life without overwhelming it. The third gate of summer marked the beginning of the sun's return journey toward the south. Though it was still one of the high summer gates, its light carried a subtle hint that the peak of summer was passing and that the earth would soon begin its slow transition toward autumn. Wise farmers knew that when the sun began using this gate, it was time to start thinking about the harvest that would come in a few months. The first gate of autumn was positioned lower than the summer gates, but still higher than the winter gates. When the sun passed through this gate, people on Earth would notice that the days and nights were becoming equal in length. The light from this gate had a golden quality that seemed to encourage plants to focus their energy on producing fruits and seeds rather than growing larger. This was the light that turned green leaves into brilliant reds and yellows and oranges. The second gate of autumn brought the cooling energy that helped plants prepare for winter. Its light was gentler and more slanted, creating the shorter days and longer nights that signaled to trees that it was time to drop their leaves, and to animals that it was time to grow thicker fur and gather food for the cold months ahead. This gate also brought the crisp, clear weather that made autumn such a beautiful and comfortable season. The third gate of autumn completed the transition from the warm months to the cold months. When the sun used this gate, people knew that winter was approaching and that it was time to finish their harvest and prepare their homes for cold weather. The light from this gate was pale and weak compared to the summer gates, but it was exactly the right strength to help the earth gradually slow down and prepare for its winter rest. The first gate of winter was located at the lowest point on the eastern wall. When the sun passed through this gate, it created the shortest day and longest night of the year. But rather than being dark and depressing, this gate provided a gentle, restful light that allowed the earth to sleep and recover from the busy months of growth and activity. Many people found the quiet beauty of this gate's light to be peaceful and comforting. The second gate of winter continued the theme of rest and recovery. Its light was soft and silvery, encouraging people and animals to stay warm and quiet while the earth renewed itself beneath blankets of snow and frost. This gate also brought the deep cold that was necessary to kill harmful insects and diseases, and to prepare the soil for the new growth that would come with spring. The third and final gate of winter began the transition back towards spring. Though it was still one of the low winter gates, its light carried a subtle promise that the cold season would not last forever. When people saw the sun beginning to use this gate, they knew that spring was only a few months away, and that soon the cycle of seasons would begin again with renewed hope and energy. The wisdom Enoch received. As Enoch's journey through heaven continued, he began to understand that learning about the 12 gates was about much more than just understanding how the sun and moon moved across the sky. The angels explained to him that the gates represented deep truths about the way God had designed all of creation to work together in perfect harmony. Every detail of the gate system contained wisdom that could help people live better lives and understand their place in God's great plan. One of the most important lessons that Enoch learned was about the value of order and regularity. The sun and moon and stars did not wander randomly through the sky, doing whatever they felt like doing at any moment. Instead, they followed precise schedules and routes that never varied unless God specifically commanded a change. This taught Enoch that God values faithfulness and reliability. Just as the heavenly bodies could be trusted to do their jobs correctly every day, people should also strive to be dependable and consistent in their own lives. Enoch also learned about the importance of each individual part working for the good of the whole. No single gate tried to do the work of all the other gates. The summer gates did not try to provide gentle spring warmth, and the winter gates did not try to provide strong summer heat. Each gate had its own specific purpose and accomplished that purpose perfectly without interfering with the work of the other gates. This taught Enoch that people should focus on doing their own jobs well, rather than trying to control or take over other people's responsibilities. The gradual transitions between the gates taught Enoch about the wisdom of patience and gradual change. The sun did not jump suddenly from winter gates to summer gates, because such a drastic change would shock and damage the earth. Instead, it moved slowly and steadily from gate to gate, allowing plants and animals time to adjust to each small change. This showed Enoch that the best changes in life usually happen gradually over time, rather than all at once. People who tried to rush important changes often caused problems for themselves and others. Enoch learned that even though the gate system was incredibly complex, it was also perfectly balanced. The amount of light and heat that came through the summer gates was exactly balanced by the amount of rest and cooling that came through the winter gates. The energy of spring was perfectly matched by the harvest time of autumn. This balance meant that the earth never became too hot or too cold, never had too much growth or too much rest. It taught Enoch that balance was essential in all areas of life. The angels also revealed to Enoch that the gate system provided multiple layers of backup and redundancy. If something ever happened to prevent the sun from using its assigned gate, there were alternative routes that could be used to make sure the earth still received the light and warmth it needed. Similarly, If one group of stars ever failed to appear, other stars could take over their functions. This redundancy meant that the systems that supported life on Earth were incredibly stable and reliable. Perhaps most importantly, Enoch learned that the entire gate system existed not for its own sake, but to serve life on Earth. Every movement of the sun and moon and stars was designed to provide exactly what plants and animals and people needed to survive and thrive. The gates were not just beautiful cosmic machinery, but were expressions of God's love and care for all living things. This taught Enoch that the highest purpose in life was to serve others rather than to seek glory or power for oneself. The angels explained that human beings had a special role in God's creation because they were the only creatures on Earth who could understand and appreciate the complexity and beauty of systems like the 12 gates. Animals and plants benefited from the gates, but they did not have the ability to study them and learn from them. Only humans could look up at the sky and see not just sources of light, but evidences of God's wisdom and love. This gave humans both a privilege and a responsibility to use their understanding wisely. Enoch also learned that the knowledge he was receiving was not meant to be kept secret, but was meant to be shared with other people on Earth. The angels told him that he would eventually return to Earth and that his job would be to teach others about the wonders he had seen in heaven. By understanding how perfectly God had designed the movements of the sun and moon and stars, people would be encouraged to trust God with the details of their own lives. The calendar of heaven. During his time observing the 12 gates, Enoch discovered that the angels kept incredibly detailed records of time that were far more precise and comprehensive than any calendar used by people on Earth. The angel Uriel showed Enoch the great books of time that recorded not just days and months and years, but also much longer cycles that took centuries or even thousands of years to complete. The basic unit of heavenly time was the day, which was measured by one complete journey of the sun from an eastern gate through the sky to the corresponding western gate and back to the eastern gate again. But unlike the simple day and night cycle that people experienced on Earth, the heavenly day included detailed information about exactly which gate was used, what path the sun followed across the sky, how long it stayed in each position, and how its light affected different parts of the Earth. The month was measured by the moon's complete cycle through the gates from new moon back to new moon again. But the heavenly month was more complex than the simple moon phases that people saw from Earth. The angels had to account for the moon's varying speed, its changing distance from Earth, the way its path intersected with the sun's path, and the influence of the stars on its movements. Each month was slightly different from every other month, even though the basic pattern remained the same. The year was measured by the sun's complete journey through all 12 gates, from the first gate of spring back to the first gate of spring again. The heavenly year contained exactly 364 days, which the angels explained was the perfect number for maintaining the proper relationship between the sun's cycle and the moon's cycle. This was different from the year that people calculated on Earth because people did not understand the precise timing of the gates. But Enoch learned that there were also much longer cycles that took many years to complete. Every few years, the angels had to make small adjustments to keep the sun and moon perfectly coordinated with each other and with the stars. These adjustments were so small that people on Earth usually did not notice them, but they were essential for maintaining the long-term stability of the calendar system. There were also great cycles that took hundreds of years to complete. During these long cycles, certain combinations of gate usage would repeat, creating special astronomical events that happened only rarely. Some of these events would cause unusually bright stars to appear in the sky. Others would cause the moon to look different, or the sun to create unusual lighting effects. The angels used these rare events to mark important periods in the history of the world. The longest cycles took thousands of years to complete and were related to very slow changes in the positions of the stars and the orientation of the gates themselves. These cycles were so long that many generations of people would live and die without seeing a complete cycle. But the angels kept careful track of these long cycles because they were important for understanding the overall plan that God had for the history of the world. Enoch was amazed to learn that all of these cycles, from the daily movement of the sun to the 1,000-year cycles of the stars, were perfectly coordinated with each other. Nothing happened by accident, and nothing was left to chance. Every movement had been calculated from the beginning of creation to work together with every other movement to create a grand symphony of time that would continue until God decided to create new heavens and a new earth. The angels also showed Enoch how the heavenly calendar was connected to important events in human history. Certain gate combinations would mark the times when God would send prophets or perform miracles or judge nations for their sins. Other combinations would mark times of peace and prosperity when people would be especially blessed. By understanding the calendar of heaven-wise people on earth could better understand God's timing for events in their own lives and in the world around them. Uriel explained to Enoch that one of the reasons God had brought him to heaven was so that he could take this calendar knowledge back to earth and teach it to other people. Many people on earth were using calendars that were inaccurate because they did not understand the true movements of the sun and moon through the gates. This caused confusion about when to celebrate religious festivals, when to plant and harvest crops, and when to prepare for seasonal changes. By learning the correct calendar from the angels, Enoch would be able to help people on earth live in better harmony with the natural rhythms that God had built into creation. They would know the right times for work and rest, for planting and harvesting, for celebration and mourning. Most importantly, they would understand that time itself was a gift from God that should be used wisely and gratefully. The music of the spheres. As Enoch spent more time observing the 12 gates and the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, he began to notice something wonderful that he had not expected. All of the celestial bodies, as they moved through their appointed paths, were creating a kind of music. It was not music like people made on earth with instruments and voices, but was a deeper, more beautiful kind of harmony that seemed to come from the very structure of creation itself. Each gate, when opened, produced its own musical tone. The summer gates created high, bright notes that sounded like joy and celebration. The winter gates produced lower, deeper notes that sounded like peace and rest. The spring and autumn gates created middle tones that sounded like hope and gratitude. When the sun passed through a gate, it would cause that gate's tone to ring out across heaven like a great bell announcing the time and season to all of creation. But the individual gate tones were just the beginning of the heavenly music. As the sun and moon and different groups of stars moved through various gates at the same time, their combined tones created chords and harmonies of incredible beauty and complexity. Sometimes the harmonies were simple and peaceful, like a gentle lullaby. Other times they were rich and powerful, like a great chorus celebrating a victory. The angel Gabriel explained to Enoch that this music served several important purposes in heaven. First, it helped all the angels stay coordinated with each other. By listening to the music, they could tell exactly where every celestial body was located and whether everything was moving according to the proper schedule. If any sun or moon or star began to drift from its assigned path, the change in the music would alert the responsible angels immediately. The music also served as a form of worship and praise to God. Every note and chord was an expression of the perfection and beauty of God's creation. The angels who guided the celestial bodies took joy in creating this music as they did their work. They saw themselves not just as guardians and guides, but as members of a great orchestra performing a symphony that had been composed by God Himself before the world began. Enoch learned that different seasons produce different types of music. Spring music was light and dancing, full of quick, bright notes that matched the energy of new growth and renewal. Summer music was strong and triumphant, with bold melodies that celebrated the power of life in full bloom. Autumn music was warm and rich, like a harvest celebration, filled with gratitude for the abundance of the earth. Winter music was quiet and contemplative, with gentle harmonies that encouraged rest and reflection. But perhaps most amazing of all, Enoch discovered that the heavenly music could sometimes be heard on earth by people who knew how to listen for it. On very quiet nights, when the air was still and clear, sensitive people could detect faint echoes of the gate music drifting down from heaven. Shepherds watching their flocks, musicians composing songs, and wise men studying the stars had sometimes reported hearing mysterious, beautiful music that seemed to come from the sky itself. The angels told Enoch that this heavenly music had influenced human music throughout history. When people on earth created songs and melodies that were especially beautiful, they were unconsciously echoing the harmonies they had heard from the gates. The best human music was a reflection of the cosmic music that played constantly in heaven as the sun and moon and stars danced through their eternal paths. Enoch also learned that the music of the gates had healing power. The harmonies created by the proper movement of celestial bodies through the gates helped maintain the health and balance of all life on earth. When people felt peaceful and happy during certain seasons or times of day, they were responding to the beneficial effects of the gate music. Conversely, when the music was disrupted by any disturbance in the normal patterns, it could cause unrest and discomfort among people and animals. The angel Raguel showed Enoch how some of the most beautiful music occurred during rare astronomical events, when unusual combinations of gates were used simultaneously. During these special times, multiple celestial bodies would create chord progressions and melodic patterns that were far more complex and beautiful than the daily music. These events were like cosmic concerts that the angels eagerly anticipated and celebrated. As Enoch listened to the music of the gates, he found that it affected him deeply. The harmonies filled him with peace and joy and a profound sense of connection to all of creation. He understood that this music was one of the ways that God communicated love and blessing to the universe. Every note was an expression of divine care, and every harmony was a reminder that all things work together according to God's perfect plan. Enoch's return to Earth. After spending what seemed like a very long time in heaven, learning about the 12 gates and all their mysteries, Enoch began to sense that his heavenly journey was approaching its end. The angels who had been his teachers and guides started to speak about his return to Earth and about the important work he would need to do there. Enoch felt both excited and nervous about going back to his earthly life with all the amazing knowledge he had gained. The angel Uriel gathered all the other angels who had taught Enoch during his journey. Together they reviewed everything that Enoch had learned to make sure he understood it correctly and completely. They tested his knowledge of the 12 gates and their purposes. They asked him to explain the movements of the sun and moon and stars. They had him recite the calendar calculations and describe the music of the spheres. Enoch was able to answer all their questions perfectly. But the angels explained that knowing the information was only the first part of Enoch's responsibility. The more important part would be teaching this knowledge to other people on Earth in ways that they could understand and use. The angels gave Enoch special wisdom about how to explain complex heavenly truths using simple earthly examples. They taught him how to help people see the connections between what happened in the sky and what happened in their daily lives. Uriel presented Enoch with a set of tablets made of a material that looked like crystal, but was harder than any stone on Earth. Written on these tablets in letters that glowed with their own light were all the laws and measurements and calculations that governed the 12 gates. These tablets would serve as Enoch's reference books when he returned to Earth so that he could teach others with perfect accuracy. Gabriel gave Enoch a special understanding of time that would allow him to create accurate calendars for people on Earth. This gift included the ability to calculate not just years and months and days, but also the longer cycles that took many years to complete. Enoch would be able to help people plan their activities in harmony with the natural rhythms of creation and avoid the problems that came from using inaccurate calendars. Raguel blessed Enoch with the ability to read the messages that God wrote in the sky through the movements and positions of the stars. This would allow Enoch to understand when important events were approaching and to warn people about times of difficulty or encourage them about times of blessing. But the angels cautioned Enoch to use this ability wisely and to always point people toward God rather than toward the stars themselves. As the time for departure approached, the angels gathered around Enoch for a final blessing ceremony. They sang songs of thanksgiving for the time they had spent together and prayers for success in Enoch's earthly mission. They reminded him that even though he would be returning to Earth, he would never be alone because God would be with him always, and the angels would continue to watch over him and help him when he needed guidance. The journey back to Earth was very different from the journey up to heaven. Instead of gradually rising through different levels of heaven, Enoch found himself gently floating downward through clouds and sky until he could see the familiar landscape of his earthly home spread out below him. As he descended, he felt his heavenly body changing back into his earthly body, though he retained all the knowledge and abilities that the angels had given him. When Enoch's feet finally touched the ground, he looked up at the sky with completely new understanding. The sun that was shining down on him was the same sun he had watched traveling through the eastern and western gates. The birds flying overhead were following migration patterns that were guided by the movements of star constellations through the gates. Even the gentle breeze that touched his face was part of weather patterns that were influenced by the cosmic harmonies created by the gate system. Enoch's first task was to find his family and friends and begin sharing with them the incredible things he had learned. But he quickly discovered that most people were not ready to hear about the complexities of the 12 gates and the detailed workings of heaven. He had to start with simple truths and gradually build up people's understanding before he could share the deeper mysteries. He began by teaching people to pay closer attention to the natural world around them. He showed them how to notice the gradual changes in the sun's position throughout the year and how these changes were connected to the changing seasons. He taught them to observe the phases of the moon and to use these phases to keep track of months and plan their activities. He helped them see patterns in the stars that could guide them in navigation and agriculture. As people became more interested in these earthly applications of heavenly knowledge, Enoch gradually began to share more of what he had learned about the gates themselves. He told them about the angels who guided the sun and moon and stars. He explained how everything in the sky followed God's perfect plan, and how this plan was designed to provide exactly what people on earth needed for life and happiness. The legacy of the 12 gates, the knowledge that Enoch brought back from heaven about the 12 gates, had a profound impact that lasted for many generations after his time on earth. People who learned from Enoch passed the teachings on to their children and grandchildren, creating a chain of wisdom that helped humanity understand their place in God's creation and live in harmony with the natural world around them. The most immediate practical benefit of Enoch's teaching was the development of accurate calendars that helped people coordinate their activities with the seasons and celestial cycles. Farmers learned when to plant their crops for the best harvests. Shepherds learned when to move their flocks to new pastures. Sailors learned to navigate by the stars with confidence. Festival celebrations were scheduled at times that matched the natural rhythms of the year. But the impact of the gate knowledge went far beyond just practical applications. People who understood how perfectly God had designed the movements of the sun and moon and stars found their faith in God's wisdom and power greatly strengthened. When they faced difficult problems in their own lives, they could look up at the sky and remember that the same God who kept every star in its proper place was also watching over them and working out every detail of their lives according to a perfect plan. The knowledge also helped people develop a deeper appreciation for the complexity and beauty of creation. Instead of taking the daily sunrise and sunset for granted, they began to see these events as daily miracles that declared God's faithfulness. Instead of seeing the changing seasons as merely practical matters, they began to understand them as expressions of God's care and provision for all living things. Scholars and wise men used Enoch's teachings as the foundation for developing more advanced understanding of astronomy and mathematics. They learned to make precise calculations about eclipses and other rare celestial events. They developed instruments for measuring time and position with great accuracy. They created maps of the star patterns that helped travelers navigate safely across great distances. Religious leaders found in the gate teachings powerful illustrations for spiritual truths. Just as the sun faithfully followed its appointed path through the gates, every day, people should faithfully follow the path that God had laid out for their lives. Just as each gate had its own purpose and timing, people should be patient and wait for God's timing in their own circumstances. Just as all the celestial bodies work together in harmony, people should work together in love and cooperation. Artists and musicians were inspired by Enoch's descriptions of the beauty and music of heaven to create earthly works that reflected these heavenly realities. Poets wrote verses about the dance of the stars through the gates. Musicians composed melodies that echoed the harmonies of the spheres. Craftsmen created beautiful objects decorated with patterns that represented the movements of celestial bodies. Even children were touched by the gate teachings, as parents used the stories to help them understand basic truths about God's character and care. The faithful journey of the sun through its daily gates became a bedtime story that assured children that God watched over them while they slept. The changing phases of the moon became a monthly reminder that God had a plan for every stage of life, from childhood through old age. As the generations passed, some people began to forget or distort the original teachings that Enoch had brought from heaven. Some focused too much on the practical applications and lost sight of the spiritual truths. Others became so fascinated with the technical details that they forgot that the purpose of the gates was to serve life on earth. Still others began to worship the celestial bodies themselves instead of worshipping the God who had created and controlled them. But the core truths about the 12 gates were preserved by faithful people who understood their real meaning and importance. These truths continue to provide hope and guidance to people throughout history. During times of war and disaster, people could look up at the unchanging patterns of the sky and be reminded that God was still in control. During times of doubt and confusion, they could observe the reliable cycles of sun and moon and stars and be encouraged that God's promises were just as reliable. The teachings also provided a foundation for people to better understand later revelations that God would give to other prophets and teachers. When these later teachers spoke about God's sovereignty over history and nature, people who knew about the 12 gates could understand these concepts more easily because they had already learned about God's detailed control over the movements of celestial bodies. Most importantly, the gate teachings helped people maintain a sense of wonder and humility before the greatness of God's creation. Every time they looked up at the sky, whether during the day or at night, they were reminded that they were part of something far larger and more beautiful than themselves. This helped them keep their earthly problems in proper perspective and encourage them to trust God with the details of their lives, just as God trusted the sun and moon and stars to fulfill their appointed roles in the cosmic order. The eternal dance. As our journey through Enoch's amazing discovery comes to an end, it is important to understand that the story of the 12 gates is not just an ancient tale from long ago, but a truth that continues every single day. Right now, as you read these words, the sun is traveling through one of the 12 gates on its way across the sky. Tonight, when darkness falls, the moon and stars will follow their own appointed paths through the gates, bringing light and beauty to the night. The same angels that Enoch met during his heavenly journey are still faithfully doing their jobs. Uriel still watches over the sun, making sure it rises and sets at exactly the right times. Gabriel still guides the moon through its monthly cycle of phases. Raguel and the other star angels still keep the constellations in their proper positions and guide them along their slow, stately paths through the heavens. The music of the spheres still plays every day and night as the celestial bodies move through the gates in perfect harmony. The healing and blessing power of this cosmic music still flows down to earth, bringing peace and health and hope to all living things. The calendar of heaven still marks the passing of days and months and years with perfect precision, keeping everything in creation synchronized with God's eternal plan. Every sunrise is still a daily miracle that demonstrates God's faithfulness. Every season change is still a reminder of God's perfect timing and provision. Every star that shines in the night sky is still following the same laws that Enoch learned about during his visit to heaven. Nothing has changed about the fundamental reality that all of creation operates according to God's wise and loving design. This means that we can apply the same lessons that Enoch learned to our own lives today. We can choose to be faithful and reliable like the sun that never fails to complete its daily journey. We can work together with others in harmony like the celestial bodies that coordinate their movements to create the music of the spheres. We can trust God's timing in our lives like the moon that patiently follows its monthly cycle without trying to rush ahead or fall behind. We can also find comfort and encouragement in the knowledge that the same God who keeps every star in its proper place is also watching over every detail of our daily lives. When we face problems that seem too big for us to handle, we can remember that God manages the incredibly complex movements of billions of celestial bodies without ever making a mistake. Surely this same God can handle whatever difficulties we are facing. When we feel small and unimportant, we can remember that the entire system of 12 gates exists to serve life on earth, including our own lives. The sun shines for us. The moon marks time for us. The stars provide guidance for us. We are not forgotten or overlooked, but are precious enough to God that He has organized the entire universe to support and bless our existence. When we struggle with questions about meaning and purpose, we can look up at the sky and see the example of celestial bodies that find their fulfillment in doing exactly what God created them to do. Just as the sun finds joy in bringing light and warmth to the earth, we can find joy in using our own unique gifts and abilities to serve God and help others. The story of Enoch and the 12 gates also reminds us that there are still mysteries and wonders in God's creation that we have not yet discovered. Just as Enoch was amazed by the things he saw in heaven, we can cultivate a sense of wonder and curiosity about the world around us. Every sunset, every phase of the moon, every constellation in the night sky is an invitation to learn more about God's wisdom and creativity. Most importantly, the 12 gates teach us that we are part of a story that is much larger than our individual lives. We are connected to every other person on earth who sees the same sun and moon and stars. We are connected to all the generations of people who have lived before us and all who will live after us, because we all share the same sky and the same celestial cycles. We are even connected to the angels in heaven who continue their faithful service day after day. This great cosmic story gives our lives meaning and dignity. We are not accidents or mistakes, but are beloved participants in God's eternal plan. Our choices matter not just for ourselves, but for the harmony of all creation. Our faithfulness adds to the great symphony of praise that rises from earth to heaven. Our love and service to others reflects the love and service that God shows to us through the perfectly designed system of gates and celestial movements. So the next time you see the sun rising in the morning or the moon shining at night, remember Enoch's journey and the amazing truths he learned about the 12 gates of heaven. Remember that you are witnessing not just natural phenomena, but expressions of God's love and care. Remember that you are part of a cosmic dance that has been going on since the beginning of creation and will continue until God creates new heavens and a new earth, where we will finally see all mysteries revealed and all questions answered. Until that day comes, we can live with confidence and hope, knowing that the same God who designed the secret routes of the sun and moon through the 12 gates of heaven has also designed a perfect plan for each of our lives. Like Enoch, we can walk with God day by day, trusting that He will guide us along the right path at the right time toward the right destination. And like the sun and moon and stars, we can find our greatest joy in faithfully fulfilling the unique purpose for which God created us.